Hello, good morning, Mike.
Jack, it's great to see you. Happy Thursday. Hope you are well. Have you had an eventful week?
Yeah, well, I guess the use cases are kind of interesting, focusing on basically self-improving meta prompting architectures, where I'm realizing more and more that either I don't want to or I'm not capable of building the prompts the way I kind of envision them. So it's not exactly an instance of
Well,
laziness.
that's actually really interesting. Yeah, tell me more.
Yeah, it's not exactly an instance of laziness, but in some cases, like for example, in the area of contract review, for example, if
Mhm.
you have a legal case that is really difficult to describe, even by an expert, then my job to kind of transcribe it into some sort of a declarative prompt that is unequivocal and clean, and all that.
Sure.
It's kind of getting harder and harder as we move into harder and harder use cases.
Hmm.
So yeah, so the idea would be, hey, here's an agent, right? And let's start looping over my initial idea of how the prompt is supposed to look like, and create some sort of a meta level self-improvement routine where here's my initial prompt, here's an expert knowledge as good transcribed as I can make it, and here's the document, right, that has to look in a certain way. Can we optimize the whole thing so that the outcome is going to look similar to what the example might be, and then can it be generalized enough so that it's going to work for unseen instances, the typical machine learning kind of setup.
I mean, I think we're on the same. We're pretty much always on the same wavelength, right? Because
Yeah.
my conundrum is, although for some reason I have been more active on Reddit lately and sharing some things like this, and for some reason it always seems to come out to I believe it's Girdle is how you pronounce his name,
Yeah,
right? That there's
I
always a
guess.
level above, right? That's the whole point. I mean, he went to great lengths, right, and disproved mathematics, or not disproved it, but showed that it is incomplete, right? It cannot solve everything, right? And as we get more powerful and powerful tools, I always kind of go there that there's always a level above, and maybe I'm mischaracterizing what you're saying. I don't mean to.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm interested in the level above, right? Like, um, yeah, if if an AI system can do something, right, it has to be told what to do, one way or another, right? And but what if there was this novel a long time ago, sci-fi novel that basically, hey, maybe 5 years from now it's not going to be sci-fi anymore, but there was basically the entire civilization equipped with very smart AIs, and those AIs were communicating in some sort of a hyper-conscious kind of manner, where maybe it wouldn't be detectable by the humans, but the AIs kind of found a way, this kind of like telepathy, kind of like messaging kind of a thing, right? So yeah, so what if, right, like the AI can actually come up with a better way to formulate and solve a problem. So that's the meta
Well,
level
can I
that we
just
want to
say
be at.
hive
Yeah,
mind, right? A
yeah,
hive mind
yeah.
is kind of where we
Hmm.
exist, I suppose, right? You're dealing with law, which is
Hmm.
hive mind, and engineering is, I mean, all of it is meant
Hmm.
to kind of, in general, make us all better. But I've got a new phrase, which is called outsourcing knowledge. So one thing
Hmm.
is that we are all very, very keen to outsource knowledge, right? We're okay with information for some reason. We can scan TikTok forever, but when it comes to like knowledge, which tends to be important, we want somebody to take care of that.
Hmm.
Good examples like Amazon, right? Like we don't want to know everything about products. We just sort of let Amazon and Amazon reviews sort of guide us or something like so we want
Hmm.
popularity. It used to be New York Times bestsellers. Those are the books worth reading. Things like that. It's to me like you can't read everything and do everything. It's fair.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but knowledge being outsourced gets to a crux of my problem. But I'll stop there. Have I already gone way too far in this?
Well, so my engineering problem is how do you, so what are you outsourcing to, right? What is that destination for the knowledge, right? And in my case, probably it seems at the moment that the state of the art is probably the knowledge graph. With
Yeah, okay,
highly
sure.
annotated nodes and the relationships kind of captured. So it doesn't have to be graphical. It can be a table, because internally underneath, a knowledge graph is, or a semantic network is, a table. So, but it can be visualized, it can be shared with a non-technical expert, like like a legal expert, for example. If they are looking at the knowledge graph, right, exactly, yeah, they
I
can
was going to say
manipulate.
it's 2D versus
Yeah,
3D. It's the same old problem,
exactly.
right? You know, if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
want something to be flat, you're kind of taking away probably some of its meaning, but it's useful. Yeah.
Yeah, and we already exported a lot of documents or knowledge into vector space, and so that's the famous RAG system,
Yep.
where where you vectorize in a very special way the words, the sentences, and even images, right? And kind of give them this kind of Markov model kind of style of representation, where
Yep.
it's not exactly just keywords, but there's relationships. So that is a very powerful search model. So yeah, so I guess the next step, what I'm tackling is, hey, what if I don't really know how to optimally solve the problem, or it's beyond my capacity to provide a guideline, right? So,
Well, I
but
think what you're doing is maybe revealing a problem that I don't think is a problem, but I think it's a problem to your the outcome you're trying to build, which
Mhm.
I think that, at least for me, that AIs with any sort of training are somewhat perfect Socratic dialogue um, generators, right? I mean, they're pretty good. They're really good at Socratic dialogues, right? Meaning you
Mhm.
have to keep pushing it into different situations and challenging its own outcomes in order to gain a better understanding yourself, which then may or may not lead to, like with me, it leads to me actually doing most of the work, but I'm still happy about it because I was able to explore more
Mhm.
thoroughly rather than being driven just to outcomes, such as summarize this document, right? Like if I
Mhm.
did it, I wouldn't be as good as AI, but I also wouldn't be as clear as I would be personally if I understood kind of what I was, the point being made, right? Like if I could
Mhm.
internalize it, I could probably figure out how to express it. And I'll give you an example in a minute, but stopping there, if it isn't an answer machine, is what I'm getting at.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And my meta level is that, like, what if I do I have to be involved in this dialogue, right? Maybe there is a better way, right? Maybe I just kind of like spin the dialogue. Maybe I just create the first question, and then the AI kind of talks to itself with the presence of the expert knowledge. And that is not this discovery or anything. People in the agentic architectures field, they were talking about it for decades, but now actually we can do that. Right now we can start
Right.
the flywheel.
I think this is the point, is once you've solved a problem, it reveals another problem. I mean, that's kind of the way it goes, right?
Yeah.
Like you're never going to kind of be done. And as far as I know, some of the issues that I'm having have to do with kind of all the naysayers, right? Which is interesting because I'm like, there are nothing but problems in this world.
Yeah.
Right?
And misunderstandings.
Oh, rampant. I mean, again, there's no like, like perfect enslaved state versus perfect, it's kind of back to the sci-fi where everybody in Star Trek was always like wearing tiaras and wearing gowns and living in perfection. And then they come in and they're like, but you're doing something terrible. You know what I mean? There was always some moral. I mean, we're going to get into morality in a second, right? But there was always this idea of like there's some nirvana that we're supposed to have achieved by now, which becomes ever more elusive, perhaps. I'm not gonna tell the future right now.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And now with the emergence of the text to video models, now
Oh,
this
right.
this
Yes, you did send me that.
this be, this becomes like obvious, right? I mean, we it was very difficult for general public to understand, or maybe, I mean, I'm not in a disparaging way, but kind of it was difficult to understand the capabilities of vectorization and even the large language model. Yeah, it's a great conversation, but I mean, what are the applications? But now, with the videos, right, that get created, like everybody can see in a very high bandwidth the generative capability that is like in front of us, uh, and that is kind of like making it, not just for aesthetics, but for the so many digital twin style capabilities, where you will be able to visualize a chemical reaction, or you will be able to visualize some sort of a biological process. So you're opening the science in a tremendous way with the text to with the text to video large language models.
Well, I did get to play with this, and I have a very, I think it's an informed opinion because you're kind of in my realm, right? I've been a
Mm,
creative my whole life, and certainly very, very interested in imagery and design in every facet, pretty
mm,
much. And the couple of things that I immediately noticed, and I'm not sure, you might not have seen this, but I'm going to just demonstrate it right now.
mm,
I'm not
mm,
doing it for real, but for some reason, um, podcasters have noticed by holding up a microphone to their mouths that more people are engaged with what they're saying.
Interesting.
Now, you can be skeptical, but I'm going to go with this for a second because I also wrote a couple of articles about this, about noise, right? When you put a record on, you hear all this noise, and this
Mm,
noise, and in some ways, you have created by mishandling your records, basically, right? And it's unique in a way to you, and therefore people tend to pay a little more attention to a record being played than they do in a noise, like a perfect CDs or whatever, right? When something's perfect, the noise is gone. And people have
mm,
said this also about filmmaking. You watch old films and you've got grain, which is also about reality. And I'll just go ahead and, kind of point out that the universe is full of noise. We can go to Claude Shannon for 5 seconds, but you see what I mean? Like, noise is
mm,
inherent to information. So the more noise that you remove from something, the less interesting it gets. So when I saw and I started to play with these models to make
mm,
things, what really impressed me was a kind of a thing that somebody was saying about a movie. It was a comedy movie, and they were like, the problem with this movie is it was too overproduced. Like, it was too spectacular. And when something's too spectacular, it isn't as funny to people as if it's more like organic,
mm,
right? Like when I say funny, you see where I'm getting at? It's this emotional attachment we have to imperfection because it's very rampant in our world, right? And the more perfect something gets, to me, it becomes much less interesting. And I had this same experience. There's a new Superman coming out, and I don't know why people care, but so what, right? But I watched the trailer, and it was interesting to an extent. I really wasn't engaged until they started to have these battles, and then immediately I was like, well, you're kind of trying to get the audience interested, right? Like, here's some battle. Between Superman and somebody else, and here's another battle, and I swear all I could look at is like, God, CGI is just so boring now, right? Like, the more people that throw planets at each other, the less interesting it seems to get. Like, and I'm not going to put all these together under a theory, but I'm interested in see if any of this made sense. That I don't think we can have it make movies for us is the point. They look too good. Like, they have to kind of
mm.
look bad for them to be believable. Sorry.
Oh
That's a
yeah, I
lot.
totally agree. I
Oh,
totally
okay.
agree. I mean, the very first Star Wars movie, that was
Yes.
episode 4, right?
Yeah.
The opening scene, right? There's only a planet, there is Corellian corvette and one Star Destroyer. And
Right,
this is
right.
probably the scene that was probably made the one of the greatest impressions on me. The episode one or episode
Yeah,
much later ones.
it was a
There's
great setup
hundreds of
because it
yeah
had this idea that you were
yeah
tiny and this thing was huge, and it
yeah
used this
yeah exactly
scale trick to show that. And it's like, yeah, but that's storytelling. You see what I mean?
yeah
It didn't
yeah
have anything to do necessarily with this with the special effects. Do you see what I mean?
exactly yeah. And the latest Star Wars, hundreds of starships, hundreds of everything, epic battles, absolutely like blah. Okay, so what, right? So
Well,
yeah,
but
so
isn't that incredible? Like
yeah, it
that it
is. Yeah.
doesn't happen, like if you started there, I don't think that people would, again, I don't think they would be that much different. They wouldn't say, oh, wow, because the minute you have epic battles, remember they used to have like a million extras, and it
Mhm.
was the scene in Braveheart where he gives the speech. That was the exciting part. But when you go to
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings and there's a million orcs battling, you're kind of like, okay, whatever. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
you only care about things like the daughter fighting or whatever the story is. I can't remember, but none of the big spectacle things to me were ever like nearly as interesting as, of course, this little plot thread, which is this woman going to do something against the will of her father, the king? That
Yeah.
was the emotional arc of the whole battle, I thought, right?
Yeah.
And Legolas jumping around and stuff was just to be funny, I suppose. I don't know, whatever. Yeah, it's
Mm.
like the spectacle. I don't think will win, and I really do think the more I see from AI, and it tried to generate some stuff for me, and I really just like fell flat because it was just too fancy. Like I just
Yeah.
want a square and a circle to animate together. Like
Mm.
can you do that? And it's like it's really it can't. Like it's really hard for it to like cool its jets.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's so many examples in cinematography. One of the first Steven Spielberg's movie was the Duel, right? It was just the guy in the car and the guy in a big truck, right? And you basically all you are looking at is a little car, a big truck, and the facial expressions, the fear, in somebody's eyes. Or the movie called Deterrence. The
Mhm.
whole movie takes place in a diner, and the stranded president of the United States battling terrorists, and you are glued, like almost sweating, like what's happens next. And this was probably a movie that you could do from one camera, without any props, anything, just kind of like the script was simply great, the story was great. Yeah. And
Oh,
yeah,
and
so
well,
there
and
is a
don't
lot. Yeah.
forget that the method, right, of slowing down, because there's also the famous scene in All the President's Men where he's on the phone, so you don't even hear the other conversation. It's Robert Redford, and
Mm.
he's uncovering, the conspiracy, right? And like you said, it just sits on it for minutes and minutes, and you again are just enthralled because
Mm.
you don't get all the information, but you're there and you're present within this event, right? And you can kind of sense it because you get it from the people in the
Mm.
scene. That they're the ones who make things important. It's probably why this green screen thing has to go, right? Because they all say like, I can't act because there's nothing there.
Yeah.
There's
Mm.
nothing to actually react to, and therefore I can't make something believable if I don't believe it, if I don't look like I'm believing it myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know
Exactly.
and
And maybe this is the very same thing that is the microphone that you are talking about. Microphone in front of the person that
right.
talks. I mean, if you remember the old
Yeah,
school talk shows,
yeah, yeah.
night talk shows, there was always, like in Jay Leno, there was always a big fancy microphone on the desk, because that was accentuating the fact that they are talking, even though probably they did never use that microphone. It was just always on the desk, right, to kind of accentuate the process. So so that is something that, yeah, I kind of tend to agree with you that you might be right about the microphone being in the scene.
Well, I think it's the things, my hope is that AI helps us be much more human, right? That's kind of my optimism,
Mm,
is that all the things that make us human, which happens to be about being deliberative, about probably hopefully worrying more about causation than we do now, right? Like doing things changes
mm,
things, and therefore to be deliberative is helpful, right? Rather than
mm,
just be performative, the kind of subject of my book thing, right? Like
mm.
this, a lot of it's just to get something to look like it's happening rather than actually happening. And
Yeah.
if we also realize that time and study, I was lucky, well, not lucky, but I had an art degree, and I don't think people realize that when you take art classes, they're twice as long as regular classes. So it's built in that you're supposed to spend more time, which to me, I think was kind of miraculous, right? Because if you don't know how much time things take, if you go into your calculus class for an hour, you kind of get the feeling like, well, calculus takes about an hour, when
Mm,
really it probably takes you. How long did it take Newton? Probably, well, he came up with it pretty quick, actually, but you know what I mean? It was like he
mm,
probably spent, 10 years thinking about it, and then he came up with it, is what I
mm,
always think, right? Like it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's usually like a slow burn. But once you're given principles to use, people tend to think they're instantaneous, right? Like this is just a hammer and this is just a microphone. And you see what I mean? You don't ever get to slow down and think, what is audio? Where does it matter where I put my mouth next to the microphone, which is what everyone who's ever been
mm,
good at this figures out, right? They're
mm,
like, my voice, when I do this, the mic, they learn how to use the microphone is what they do. Like they're
mm,
performers from, Frank Sinatra was kind of like the perfect example of this, right? He never really got very loud, but he learned how to sing into a microphone.
yeah.
And it's indelible, right? As being that's the sound he created, but no, it's the sound him and his microphone created,
Mm,
which I think people discount often too. Although if you're into recordings, people get way too into vintage microphones. That's like a whole because they want the microphone, but it's really the technique, unfortunately, right? It's how to use it is the hard part, and maybe um, we can segue slightly, and I don't mean to segue, but the same thing you're having, right? There is no empirically better summary of a bunch of ideas, especially
mm,
legal ideas, unless they have some sort of useful orchestrator, right? A conductor, let's call us that, right? Like you need a conductor. Do you need to actually put in all the effort to read? I just went through 3 books, all of which were very good, but all of which I read to make sure that I didn't steal somebody's ideas.
mm.
Which I didn't because they're just different, that's all. Like, I mean, see what I mean? Like we want this
Yeah.
value to our work thing. And
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, there are, your kind of what we are trying to convey is, like, hey, so the Vienna Symphony, right? Von Karajan was a great conductor, and maybe they sounded better, but were the musicians necessarily in that ensemble better? Maybe not, but it's just that the conductor was able to kind of transfer something on a maybe subliminal level that made them sound a little bit better than other orchestras from other places, right? So but I think what will happen is that with large language models, uh, those are trained maybe on examples where that tacit knowledge existed,
mm,
and that's going to be actually transferred. So perhaps if you want something that shows maybe a conversation, maybe the AI will generate that conversation with a microphone in the scene between the talking heads, right? Because that tacit knowledge is somewhere embedded, and maybe we cannot really put our finger on it, but chances are that there is something that is going to be transferred.
Well, you bring up a good point because I just downloaded the new DeepSeek model because I keep thinking it's fun that you can just have these things now, right? Like you know,
Yeah.
like I mean, I really don't know what goes into training AIs, and I kind of don't want to. And my hope, and I think I say it a few times, is I hope it's just noise. That's what I keep saying. Like, I hope most of it isn't anything useful because I think noise is what makes pattern more interesting, right?
Mm.
Because if you're just quoting from somebody's book, that's not good. You see what I mean? Like if you're just recapitulating someone else's thought and making it your own, the reason I read I read two James Cleek books, and I read a thing called Weapons of Math Destruction, which is very good. But they just repeated different stories about the thing I already wrote 3 articles about. But it was good because they're actually a better writer than I am, which is
Mm.
good too, right? But fun, interesting stories, and stories I think might be just the basis for all this, right? We just like stories. And if stories are
Mm.
good, then it doesn't really matter who came up with them, right? Unless you're Disney and you can copyright something for 100 years and just say, yeah, I came up with this dumb mouse character, but apparently it's
Mm.
worth a lot of money, right? Uh, that's probably not what most ideas are, right? They're supposed to go out into the world and they're supposed to inspire other people to have more ideas and whatever. We all win, something like that.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. I think that on my side, yeah, I'm probably, I have a lot more faith in math, and and kind of like hard science than you, right? You are more into kind of like an emotional kind of feeling kind of level, so you are more emphatic, I guess, and I was always since I did a little bit of research into affective reasoning, and when I looked
Mhm.
at all these things and how how well you can describe somebody's feeling, like, hey, in that context you're crying, but in that context you're smiling, and so you can create a sophisticated mathematical model of a feeling, and maybe it is not a true, quote unquote, true thing, but it is close enough so that you can have somebody and be fooled like the ELIZA system, like decades ago, fooled people. Hey, why are you so short with me? And hey, can we have a normal conversation? And all those things have just tremendously evolved. So I don't really know. I mean, I remember that scene from Terminator, right? Like, I think John Connor asks Arnold Schwarzenegger, "Hey, do you feel pain?" And the answer was, "Well, I have a memory of my internal or system damage, and that data can be described as pain." And
Right, that's
that was.
RoboCop. Oh, whatever. Well, but to that point, I mean, I've been very, I mean, you know how much I love math, so don't give me that. I'm
Mm,
I'm
mm,
I'm I'm more mathematical in many ways, but I had a very strong feeling about robotics, right? Which is I don't
mm,
believe because robots can never truly understand causality, that
mm,
they can never be well, if we wanted them to be like us, they would have to go through what we went through. That's what I was going to
mm,
say. Like they would have to learn. And then to your point, I did come up with the horrible idea that, well, if they all shared each other's experiences,
mm,
then they could learn faster than we do. Thankfully, though, we give ourselves what, a dozen years or so to figure things out. So that's cool, but we make individuals out of that, right? But if you wanted to make a robot that wouldn't necessarily, it can't understand causality, but it could recognize its role in negative causality, maybe. But again, you'd just be creating humans then. And I'm like, well, what's the point, right? We already have humans. It's like that. Is it worth the money? Is what I keep thinking. Like, is that what we want so much? Is non-human humans that yet won't kill us by accident because they don't understand? Again, they can't understand anything, right? They can't experience pain. They're not RoboCop, right?
Well, so what is the difference between RoboCop, right, and the Terminator, right? Is it only that, the RoboCop was kind of a biological robot, and the
Yes,
Terminator
RoboCop was
is,
his brain. He got shot, and then they messed with his brain or something. I mean, it's a good movie. I like it a lot. But
yeah,
Terminator,
it
I
was,
think,
yeah.
was a robot that the robots built. I think, right? Like the Skynet built Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think
Yeah, so the
it's
CPU
all
was silicon
yeah.
and versus biological. I think that is philosophically, this is a very thin argument, like, hey, a biological CPU is going to experience something, but the silicon CPU is not capable of experiencing anything. I think it's a thin philosophical argument that can be discussed, at length, but what if, right, we have a situation that is okay. So different level of complexity. Let's say the RoboCop would be maybe just kind of like partially disabled in the brain function, right? At what point the RoboCop becomes an equivalent of Terminator, right? Like, so you diminish the biological brain, so it's kind of maybe less and less human, to a point that maybe you kind of leave just the core function, like the heart monitoring function, the central brain system that is really not kind of like abstract, responsible for abstract thinking, something like that. At what point there is going to be that barrier? Okay, so this is no longer a system that can feel really, through emotions or through you see what I'm getting at. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
well, I
becoming
mean, I
a
think they're
very
both
deep.
thin. You're right. I mean,
Mm,
these are always a bit thin, but they're supposed to be. I mean, these also, I think, were movies, not books. I'm pretty
mm,
sure, right? Because
mm.
if you're in the Philip K. Dick world, most of those have a pretty solid, like, um, philosophical point of view that they're trying to explore, right? Like the androids dreaming of electric sheep kind of thing, like Blade Runner, is got its thematic thing is clearer
Very good. Yeah. So
than yeah,
Rachel, right? Rachel in
yeah,
Blade Runner.
right.
Did she have the real feelings, or was she also just an implant? Because it's much more difficult to see there, right?
Well, or Deckard, the point
Yeah.
was, is he also, are you
Yeah.
is Arnold Schwarzenegger the unwilling um offspring of a idea that it didn't inhabit? Or whatever, right? Like it's just doing the bidding of this
Mm,
other thing that made it, and
mm.
therefore it can't have any real um ethics. Can we go into this one now? So I'm still working on this ethics thing, and it's
Well,
driving
that
me
is
up the
that is
wall.
hard. That is hard. But how about let's tackle something easier now with the large language models that can do text to image. we
Okay.
can we can argue that a Terminator equipped with a large language model like that can have
Mhm.
dreams, realistic dreams. Would that make it get it closer to being having real feelings? Because now you can see, hey, this thing can dream in 3D, can dreams about the scenes, can create scenes and look at them through the lens of a sleep or dream. So that is something that I think would bring Terminator much closer to a living being, right? Having a component of a dream.
Well, I think I can ask this question. I don't want to leave that because I think that tees this up really well because the idea of empathy, I think you're trying to get there. So here's my
Mm,
AI ethics issue.
mhm,
Number one, I went on Reddit, got some people's opinion about ethics. I can share that in a minute. I
mhm,
also asked many friends, and I got to kind of spread this around, and everyone's got an opinion. Okay, for some
Of
reason.
course. Mhm.
Okay, so here so far, I have lots and lots of things to talk about, but I have some titles. So I sent these out, and I'm curious your reaction. Okay,
Mhm, mhm.
I'm going to just do one, two, three, four, five of these. Do you want me to do them all at once, or would you like to do a reaction to each?
I don't know. Well, let's make it easier for me, right? Because I might kind of
That's
get
good. Nice.
overwhelmed.
So one at
But
a
yeah,
time, maybe.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, sure, yeah.
So you can give me your
Mhm.
quick 3
All
star
right.
rating. Okay,
Okay.
1 star, two
All right.
star, three
Mhm.
stars. Okay,
Okay.
that's good enough
Mhm.
for now, right? We'll just do a
All right.
first pass, right? So, title number 1, AI ethics. Are ethical outcomes possible by design?
Well, you may have good intentions, right? As a designer, you may have the best intentions in the world, and now as a designer, you can combine all the literature, all the ideas about ethics into something maybe that like I am trying to do, like a prompt, right? So yeah, is it gonna work?
Again, this is just the title. I still have to talk. But
Yeah,
as
I
the
don't
title
know.
goes, you seem intrigued, I guess.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
guess. Yeah,
interesting? Okay.
yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Now, number 2 now. Is there ethical AI? Myths, truths, and predictions.
No, right now, no. I mean, right now, all there is, and yes, it is interesting. But right now, all there is something that is called in the AI circles guardrails, right? Like, hey, you're not supposed to be talking about making, weapons, right? Or you're not supposed to be talking about hurting somebody else, that kind of thing. So is that an ethical system? Maybe it is. Maybe it is a filtering system.
The ethics of hammers. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I
Mhm.
don't know. It's a
Yeah,
hammer.
yeah. Yeah, but
Okay.
again, if how many books there is on ethics, I mean, we can go to
Well,
any
this is
library.
the problem. They've combined 2 words that don't belong together. So, but it's still interesting. So we'll put that
Hmm.
one. Sorry, there's
All right.
more. So here's
Okay.
AI ethics,
Hmm.
outsourcing responsibility or outsourcing accountability.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And now to do
Yeah.
the 2 more, since now you get the feeling. They're
Hmm.
supposed to all be, understanding ethics in AI, how machines will entangle themselves in our decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Yeah. Those
You
are
like that
those
one,
are.
Joe? See, you can't like all of them. All right.
Yeah,
So,
I
and then the
love it.
last one,
I mean, these are all book titles. This is not a short post.
it's an hour long. I'll fudge it. How's this?
Okay.
And then lastly is ethical AI. Will AI change everything, and should we try to stop it?
Well, good luck with stopping it, right? I mean,
Right. I know that
uh,
one might just be. I just I should have just given 3. But if you had one that you think is intriguing, which you are
mm,
going to help me with, so don't be
mm.
choose carefully. As what's his name? Sorry, as who is it? Indiana Jones had to do in the
Mm,
temple. When he chose the Holy Grail, he had to choose carefully. If you could
yeah.
pick a lane, which one do you think I should pick? Do you have a strong opinion? It's AI
Uh,
ethics.
mm,
Are ethical outcomes possible by design? I think the point
mm,
is that I don't think we can design ethically well. I don't think we ever have, right? Is there ethical AI is better suited, right? Because that's the contradictions
mm,
there, and I can just talk about why we think it's even possible, which is fun.
mm,
AI ethics, outsourcing responsibility or outsourcing accountability. This is my blame the Oracle thing. I mean, like
mm,
if the AI does all the work, you just need people so you can blame them because we don't like responsibility, to go into the hands of a machine, I
mm,
suppose. And then understanding ethics in AI, how machines will entangle themselves in our decisions. I like this entanglement because I'm like,
mm,
that's kind of its problem right now is that it's not doing anything, but it's kind of it's getting engaged in things because previously no one said, hey, my um uh what do we talk about all these numerical analyses is yeah, my predictions for Q4 growth were off. But that's
mm,
not the math's fault, even though it kind of is. You see what I mean? Like we kind of want these numbers and predictions to be inherently truthful because they're numeric. And I'm like, no,
mm,
numeric things get fudged right? Just as often as anything else does.
Yeah. Well, all are great. All I'm think, what I'm thinking,
Come on,
is
I'm
like
struggling. I need one. Oh, it doesn't matter.
maybe kind of like an example here, right? So in the movie 2001: Space Odyssey, Hal was very ethical, right? It went crazy because it was asked to lie,
Yep,
so but it couldn't, right? So it just
yep.
went crazy. So in that case, Hal was a very strong ethical system that simply malfunctioned because it was commanded to do
To
something
protect the
that was
mission, though, that's a very
yeah.
60s thing, though,
Yeah,
right?
so you see, yeah, so you see, I mean, there is a case there, right? Hey, the AI might have guardrails and might be ethical system
Right.
in it.
The mission could be compromised by these two jerky people that don't know anything, right? They weren't informed of
Exactly.
any of this stuff. They had no
Yeah,
idea that
exactly.
there was
Yeah.
an ulterior motive. By the way, always interesting too to find out how many prompts happen before you prompt something, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So
Well,
so
I
there is
think
one
people forget
system.
there's a human layer, a big human layer in these things that we kind of don't think is there, but they are
Yeah.
definitely they are definitely uh, what's that word? Nudged before they ever get to you. I don't know if there's any raw systems anymore, but whatever,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. Exactly. So that's one example. So HAL 9000, right? Ethical system that went kind of haywire. Now in the Alien movie, right?
Hmm.
The robot
Mother.
and mother, right? The central computer were given instruction that was very unethical, and they don't have any problem with that thing, right? So like, hey, get the life form back to our labs. All the other instructions
Yeah,
are
crew
rescinded.
expendable, right?
Crew
Isn't that the
expendable. Yeah,
line? Crew
exactly. Yeah.
expendable.
And the system and the robot have absolutely no problem. And I think it's a lot easier to build a system like that. It's a lot easier to
Yeah.
just kind
Oh,
of
well,
like
that's
follow
what
the
I'm saying.
commands.
It can't understand causality. People expendable. People, you know what I mean? You don't exist in a cooperative universe, right? You're not born of
Mm,
parents. You don't have any context in some ways, other than
mm,
what you glean from how people describe their lives, which is also very, I guess if you're gonna if and when it can um what would you call it? Like encode all of the TikTok videos,
mm,
right? Like if you could start to do all sorts of clustering on TikTok videos and whatever those are about, right? I mean, will it ever understand? It wouldn't understand anything about being alive, right? It would just understand the world of TikTok videos. And even Wikipedia, I think it's even Wikipedia has a training set right now. It says, hey,
mm,
okay, fine. If you want to train yourself, here's at least some facts, if you want to call them that. Not that all are facts, but here's some decently clean material to
mm,
train yourself on. And if you wanted to train yourself on how to write, I mean, you wouldn't go to the King James Bible, which was kind of one of the bigger books for people to understand like how writing worked.
mm,
Like this is how you communicate things. This was like the book that everybody had, right? So there's all these things in our history that were just kind of random accidents, so to speak, that
mm,
that helped inform us as a culture. And of course, we're American culture, so we're going to feel very different from other cultures that all have other kinds of stories that they grew up with, right? I'm still, how much in love I am with Portugal, but apparently they went through a fairly deep time of it's not fascism, right? What is it called? Whatever, that form of government that we don't like, and that
mm,
people tend not to like. um, Not totalitarianism, but like whatever, Mussolini and all those people, right?
mm. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, communism.
Mus-
I don't know. They went through governmental stagnation for a
mm.
long period of their time recently.
Well, yeah.
So that's going
So
to
yeah.
inform. I'm just saying that informs their ideas and their stories and their mood, so to speak. About the culture they're living in. So those things are very. I'm just saying right now AI can probably talk in a reasonable way to somebody from um, Austria compared to somebody from Japan compared to you and I, right? Like it's gonna adapt to our modality of understanding of culture, which is
Yeah,
fun. I mean, I think it's great. Again, no complaints. All I meant is there isn't one. Like that's why AI is not like conscious because it can't be singular. You know, it's more flavor of the month or something or whatever, right?
yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying. Well, yeah, so it will have to be able to handle contradictions, right? And the only architecture that can do that is a connectionist architecture, right? It's very difficult to do it in a declarative logical system, or Python, right? So
Agreed. Oh, but that's the fun of it is it gets
yeah,
close, which is
mm,
miraculous, right? And these models certainly are good. I just don't know that they are ever going to get better
mm,
because now it just brings up a new problem, right? Is to deal with all the sociological effects that we've been discussing for quite a while, which I think are still all relevant, right? I mean, even though this might be a microcosm, but we know that the jobs within technology have shifted pretty dramatically for better or for worse. Maybe not all because of AI, but certainly it's a catalyst.
yeah,
I heard actually it was more of a governmental thing about how they changed the amortization problems or amortization, and that's why people started to invest less in R&D or more forward thinking ideas, and they changed their um, models around that. Now I can go look that up, right? But that makes more sense of why a lot of people got removed because then it really was going to value optimization more. And now AI
yeah,
comes in and it's actually pretty decent at optimization, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be creative. So like
mm,
in your case, right, you don't want to hire huge legal teams anymore, I guess is the point, right? You want you want some of the basics to be done by this fabulous new technology, which makes some sense. Sooner or later
yeah.
we got the typewriters got taken away and CRTs got moved in.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. But coming back to your five things, you violated the principle of design, which says that you cannot give somebody more than three things to choose from, right? And if somebody is below average, then you probably need to give them two, right? So yeah,
it's
it's a
true.
very hard problem to kind of deal with. But I would say that if you have a use case, right, that you wanna discuss, then maybe that will determine which of this, maybe the entanglement, decision making, or maybe the ethical outcome. Um, yeah, it's sorry, Mike, it's hard for me to choose from
No, no,
so
no,
many
no.
things. Oh my
By the
goodness.
way, touche. Well done. Yes, you never. You basically should give people one choice. And even the guy who said that, the wonderful Leo Burnett said, if we come in with more than one idea, it means that this isn't, we don't know what good ideas are. And I think, but well, we always came in with three, Jack. That was the
Mm,
point. It's
okay.
always, it's always easier to not try to
Mm,
be too confident. And you're right. Coming up with five is just being
mm.
lazy. But anyway, I think a couple of these are certainly throwaways. I mean,
Mm,
if I'm just going to talk about AI, whatever, that one, nobody wants to hear what I have to think. I don't think we can stop it either. So those are two easy
mm.
ones to throw, and probably the other two are they're all other three are synonymous. And I think are ethical outcomes possible by design is sort of a bigger, right? Like, is the design of our cities ethical? Right? Because we could say suburbs are pretty bad in general for everything, kind of, right? That, more reliance on automobiles and less opportunity to meet and run into your
Mm.
neighbors is a bad thing, right? You don't have as strong a community. I think that's a design choice, right? Whereas if
Yeah.
you lived in a huge Parisian building or whatever, big apartment building in New York, right? You have a different a cultural connection with people, right? You live
Yeah.
together, you see each other, you're in the elevator together, that kind of thing, right? Like that's by design, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, uh,
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens with that linear city that they built in Saudi Arabia. That is a radical different idea, right? Hey, huge linear kind of form factor. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, you're right. Yeah.
well, as I said, I think that there's a lot of hubris of design being that powerful, but I do think ultimately computing was never asked to be ethical. It was only asked to be useful. That's kind of a starting point, right? And that while it is anthropomorphic right now, that's what becomes puzzling, right? It's starting to be more. Remember the automatons? Don't we always love these stories, right, about the Mechanical Turks and stuff? Like, here's this idea that yes, this machine can play chess. It's
Mm.
it's miraculous. I never have to bother my friends again to play chess because now I have this robot chess playing thing. I guess was the goal, right?
Yeah, well, I think that the community that created computing, if you watch the documentary, The Triumph of the Nerds,
Yeah.
I think they are stating that, hey, the early community that created all that stuff was, computer nerds, and that they are defining computer nerds as people that want to use computers in order to use computers. Right? There was no other, objective, right? They don't want to do calculations. They maybe playing games, was close, right? But they were doing it only to run some sort of a, oh, the light is blinking, right? Like the
Oh,
early.
well, and weirdly enough, all these people dumped money on them, which is even better.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's
Yeah.
where we're at, right? I mean, once you dump money on a problem, it can't help but get interesting, you know?
Mm.
And I'm lucky because the same year I think I saw Star Wars, I was on a Deck 10 playing Zork, you know? So,
Mm.
to me, it was much more impactful to have the experience of interactive fiction, which I still think is what we're doing right now, right? Like
Mm.
that you can interact with something, whether it's voice or text. I'm not as keen on visuals because I'm gonna be like, that's kind of again more TikTok-y to me, because
Mm.
not everything can be expressed visually very easily and accurately. It can be trickier. Let's just put it
Yeah,
that way.
I agree,
Yeah,
but I think it's a generational. I mean, I enjoyed
could be. Oh, I agree.
I enjoyed the Dune novel a lot more than I enjoyed all the versions of the movie, right? I mean, even though the last movies were actually spectacular, I think, but I think the book is still much better. But it's just coming from people like you and I that read a lot, and that may not be the case, for other generations or other people with different
Well, and
kind of
that the
styles.
what the time it took, that's why those big books, mine was Shogun, another big
Mm.
book, but it influenced me wanting to visit Japan, which I later did, things like that. You never went to Spice Land, is I hope, because I think it seems terrible there. But
No.
but that was the point, is you spent time somewhere, and that
Mm.
time, I think, like people spend time in Harry Potter land in the books, but you don't
Mm.
spend the same. Well, those movies are really long, but you know what I mean. Spending time in
Yeah.
the books is really memorable, as a place that you go, and they're big, right? I mean, I remember Goblet of Fire, right? And it's like, okay, you can probably read it, I think, in a day. It's sort of weird, but
Mm.
it's still like it's substantial. And thematically, I hope we have more time. That's really what I want GPT to give us, is more time to think. There you go. That's going to be hopefully my last slide.
Yeah.
It's time to think is what makes us people. We aren't machines to produce things. We can hopefully think about things more and make better choices, as you'd say to your kids all the time, I hope, right? Oh, and speaking of better choices, great news. My son is engaged. So that was big news
Oh,
over the weekend. I know.
congratulations.
I know. And it's what a good ending spot, I think, because we're
Mm.
just at time. Um,
Yeah, yeah, very good. Yeah. I think, I think the engagement and kind of, brings kind of like, different perspectives on things. I think it's kind of like a big event in the family life. But to your point, I think that the last sentence, like, can AI give us more time to think? It would be a great title for this video.
well, thank you as always, and I hope that's my ethical hope, right? That it just doesn't compound our need to be product or not to produce, right? Like that shouldn't be its goal. But we always have to, the poor stenographers, right? Did you know that the main reason there were so many typists was that to make copies?
Mm.
Yeah, if you need it, it's called a steno pool because it's like I need 10 copies of this for my meeting at 2. Well, that's going to
Really?
take you a day
Mm.
and it's going to take you 15 people. It's sort of amazing now that I don't think we remember these things, probably for good reason, because I don't know. That was something people did, and now I think once Xerox came in, we just kind of forget. And I sort of think of the world I live in being so paperless, right? And on by design, because I don't like paper. Um,
Mm.
but that shift is very takes a long time. And by the way, my mother's calling me and she loves paper. Everything she
Mm.
does is by hand. And she does just fine, by the way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and I have a lot of fountain pens on my desk, and yeah, I love paper and writing on paper.
I do love my fountain pens. I do love them.
Mm.
Just don't use them that much. All right, until next week. I so appreciate you, Jack, for letting me vent. I was really having a hard time with this, but I feel a little more confident now.
All right, great. Yeah, it was a great conversation. Thank you, Mike.
All right, cheers next week.
Yeah, cheers. Bye bye.